Hello, my name is Jack Harper. I'm an investigative journalist, but not the kind that reports on politics or social issues. No, my beat is much darker. I delve into the world of urban legends and folklore. Over the years, I've uncovered many tales, some of which were debunked, others that left me questioning my own sanity. But none have ever compared to the sheer horror of encountering the Slender Man. It started as a regular assignment. Sarah Mitchell, my trusted photographer, and I were heading to a small, desolate town called Oakridge. Nestled deep in the woods of northern Wisconsin, it was a place few ventured to. Oakridge was rumored to be a hotspot for sightings of the Slender Man, a tall, faceless figure in a black suit who supposedly stalked and abducted children. While I had always been skeptical, the stories were too compelling to ignore. My younger brother Tommy decided to tag along. He had always been a skeptic, mocking my work as chasing shadows. But this time, his concern for my well-being outweighed his disdain for my profession. We arrived in Oakridge as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the town. The air was thick with an unsettling silence, the kind that wraps around you and squeezes until you can barely breathe. We checked into a rundown motel, the only one in town. The clerk, an old man with hollow eyes, gave us a look that sent shivers down my spine. "Be careful in those woods," he warned, handing us the keys. "They're not safe after dark." Despite the clerk's warning, we set out early the next morning, eager to explore the forest. The townsfolk avoided eye contact, their faces etched with fear and suspicion. It felt as though they knew something we didn't. We ventured deeper into the woods, the towering trees closing in around us. The deeper we went, the darker it got, even though it was still midday. Sarah snapped photos, capturing the eerie beauty of the place, while Tommy made sarcastic comments to mask his growing unease. After a few hours, we stumbled upon an abandoned building, an old, decrepit mansion that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. It was perfect. If any place in these woods held secrets, it was here. We decided to split up. Sarah and I would explore the mansion, while Tommy stayed outside, keeping an eye on our surroundings. As we stepped inside, the air grew colder. The floorboards creaked beneath our feet, and the walls seemed to close in around us. Sarah's camera flashed, capturing the decaying interior in stark detail. As we moved from room to room, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and every shadow seemed to move of its own accord. Sarah noticed it too, her usual confidence replaced by a wary glance over her shoulder. Then, we heard Ita faint, almost imperceptible whispering. It was coming from upstairs. Against our better judgment, we followed the sound, climbing the rickety staircase that groaned under our weight. The whispering grew louder as we approached the attic. With a deep breath, I pushed open the door. The room was empty, save for a few old pieces of furniture covered in white sheets. But the whispering continued, now more distinct. It sounded like a child's voice, pleading for help. Sarah aimed her camera at the corner of the room, snapping a photo. As the flash illuminated the darkness, we saw Ita, a tall, shadowy figure standing just out of reach of the light. It was him, the Slender Man. Before we could react, the figure vanished, leaving us in stunned silence. We bolted out of the attic, our hearts pounding in our chests. We had to get out of there. We burst through the front door of the mansion, gasping for breath. Tommy was nowhere to be seen. Panic surged through me as I called out his name, my voice echoing through the trees. There was no response. "Jack, over here!" Sarah shouted, pointing to a small clearing just beyond the mansion. I ran to her side, my heart sinking as I saw Tommy's flashlight lying on the ground, its beam flickering weakly. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air. It was Tommy. Without thinking, I sprinted towards the sound, Sarah close behind. The scream led us to a small, dark cave hidden among the trees. I hesitated for only a moment before plunging into the darkness. The cave was cold and damp, the air thick with the smell of earth and decay. My flashlight cast eerie shadows on the walls as we navigated the narrow passage. The scream came again, this time weaker, more desperate. It spurred me on, my fear for Tommy's safety overriding my own terror. We emerged into a larger chamber, and that's when we saw him. The Slender Man stood at the far end of the room, his faceless head turned towards us. Tommy was on the ground, unconscious, but alive. The monster's long, spindly fingers reached out towards him, as if to claim his soul. "Stay away from him!" I shouted, my voice trembling. The Slender Man didn't move, but the temperature in the room dropped even further. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if all hope was draining away. Summoning every ounce of courage, I lunged forward, grabbing Tommy and pulling him away from the creature. Sarah shone her flashlight directly at the Slender Man, momentarily stunning him. We took our chance and ran, dragging Tommy with us. We stumbled out of the cave and back into the forest, never stopping, never looking back. The trees seemed to reach out for us, their branches like skeletal fingers. The whispering followed us, growing louder with every step. Finally, we reached the edge of the woods, collapsing onto the ground in exhaustion. The whispering stopped, and the forest fell silent once more. We returned to the motel, shaken and traumatized. Tommy regained consciousness, his eyes wide with fear. He couldn't remember what happened, but the terror in his eyes told me all I needed to know. We left Oakridge the next day, vowing never to speak of what we had seen. But the memory haunts me still. The Slender Man is real. He's out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for his next victim. And I can't help but wonder if one day hell come for me too. Weeks turned into months, and the experience in Oakridge left a lasting mark on all of us. Sarah's once bright demeanor dimmed, and Tommy, the eternal skeptic, was now a believer. As for me, I couldn't escape the nightmares that plagued my sleep. The faceless figure, the whispering, the cold touch of fear, they were all too real, too vivid to dismiss as just a figment of my imagination. One evening, I decided to review the photos Sarah had taken. Most of them were ordinary shots of the forest, the mansion, and the cave. But then, I found it, the photo from the attic. There in the corner was the Slender Man, his faceless head turned towards the camera as if he knew we were watching. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours, the chill creeping up my spine. The Slender Man was real, and he was watching us. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. We had escaped, but we were not safe. He was always watching, always waiting. And so, I write this as a warning. If you ever find yourself in Oakridge, or any place where the legend of the Slender Man persists, be cautious. He is real, and he is out there. Stay away from the woods, especially at night. Don't let curiosity lead you to a fate worse than death. For now, I continue my work, seeking the truth behind the myths and legends that haunt our world. But I do so with a newfound respect for the darkness that lurks just beyond the edge of our understanding. And I know that somewhere, out there, the Slender Man is waiting, watching, and perhaps one day he will come for me. Until then, I remain vigilant, ever watchful of the shadows, knowing that some legends are all too real.